Namaste, namaskaram, vanakkam, namo namaha, jai Ganesha. Please visit our website at classicalyoga.org, and there is a donate button if you'd like to help us out. And please stand up for the Hindu, yoga, religious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical lifestyle. Today's podcast, O.C.D, of course, Dharma. And later, do you Hindu? Now at first, I'm sure, and rightly, you were assuming O.C.D. was the typical acronym for obsessive-compulsive disorder. So let's look at that for a moment and differentiate between enthusiasm, fascination, fervor, warmth, keenness, eagerness, and obsession, compulsion, delusion, infatuation, manic, phobia, craze, crush, fad, addiction. The former is to be focused and passionate about life. The latter is to be narrow-minded and suffering from various forms of addiction. There's often a fine line between being passionate about someone or something and developing that into an obsessive compulsion. But this is the life journey, and we can't expect to always get it right from the get-go, as we often go from one extreme to the other, hopefully, ultimately seeking a balanced life. Examine the words compassion and the experience of love. Without passion for life, one does not develop compassion. In other words, compassion is the ability to understand through experience, feel what another person is going through, having been there oneself. This is love. If we look at love as the center of our being, the heart, and is this not what we do? We send hearts to each other on Valentine's Day. We make the heart symbol. We do namaste, Hindus, at the heart. In a sense, the balance point, the center point of the body. And then we can choose to go south or north, if you will. And there's a time to go south, to go down. And there's a time to go up, into the head, to the third eye point. This is why the Hindus wear the bindi. Puram bindu vajri purushtuktaha, becoming a youthful, soulful warrior. And if we look at the left and right hemispheres of the brain, there's a time to go east and west, if you will. There's a time to go right, there's a time to go left. There's a time to express one's positive feminine qualities, one's positive masculine qualities. The whole purpose of what we try to do here at the Classical Yoga Hindu Academy, Dharma Yoga Ashram, is to understand, obviously using English, our common language, understand certain principles that help one to get through life in a fairly positive way, a fairly peaceful way. Remembering that, as others have said, peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. In other words, a life built on rationality, justice, intellectual discernment. All of our classes, all of our lessons, our podcasts are meant to convey these basic life truths, which are open to debate, of course. It's what we do as humans, have rational discussion. To look at life in general, and then respect the specifics of life. And obviously we are coming from the specifics of the Hindu Yoga Dharma, Hinduism, the Hindu religion. So we present things in a common understanding using English language, and then we show where this comes from from the Hindu yoga, Dharma, and perhaps other religions also, but we're not pretending to teach other religions. Always having the respect to understand that it is, for example, Christians that teach Christianity. Now, we're not talking about comparative religious studies that you would get at college, university. But in the religions of the world, it's common sense, the duh factor, if you will, that Hindus teach Hinduism. It is Muslims that teach about Islam and Jews that teach about Judaism, etc. This should be common sense. For there is an interesting phenomena of people, for example, taking from the various religious traditions of the world, and in this case Hinduism, and then actually denying that it is Hinduism, and then creating their own businesses, such as today's yoga. This becomes then the acronym for the duh factor, do you Hindu? In other words, one recognizes that yoga, which is prolific today, is actually and factually all about the Hindu Dharma, Hinduism, the Hindu religion. So we'll get into that as we proceed. But O.C.D, of course, and then Dharma. So the of course part is first and foremost trying to understand some basic generalities of life that we're all going through, and some acronyms that may help in this life journey. And then obviously we're going to, as Hindus, see where this comes from a dharmic point of view. And then we're going to ask the serious question, do you Hindu? So remember, when it comes to the religions of the world, it is not being narrow-minded to simply state what one is. That's a focus. That's an enthusiasm. It's a passion, an eagerness for one's chosen religion. It is, however, narrow-minded when we erroneously believe that our religious tradition is the only one. So let's always be clear on this. When one is passionate about their religion, as long as they are accepting of the validity of another's religion, they're not being narrow-minded, they're simply being focused. We often get accused of this by the New Age yogis who insist that yoga is not Hindu, and when we insist that it is Hindu, we get accused of being narrow-minded. Basic confusion here. Again, we want to seek this balance in life, a true love and respect. And then the bindi, remember, represents the balance of the left and the right brain, using both our analytical, logical, rational thinking area, masculine, Pingala to the Hindus, and the right brain, feminine, Idda, soft, intuitive, gentle, creative. Actually, the left brain is the more religious area, and the right brain is the spiritual, which come together in a beautiful harmony of religion, spirituality. Always remember that the English word spiritual refers to that which is incorporeal, which means not your body. Therefore, no body can be spiritual. Thank goodness, the spirit is that which transcends the body. Now, as Hindus, we use the word Atmana, which is a little bit different than soul, because soul comes from the Greek psyche, which still has a connection to the mind, not the body, but the mind. However, the Sanskrit word Atmana transcends even the mind itself. Not the body, not the mind, not the emotions. But the point of the erroneous cliche, I'm spiritual but not religious, is that that is actually impossible while one has a physical body or is speaking or communicating. remembering that spirit, spiritual, soul refers to that which is not the body. It is actually the religious side, the left brain, the analytical, logical, rational principles, rituals, etc., that actually lead one into the transcendental experience of that which transcends the body. And as Hindus, we would say mind and emotions. Always remembering that the word transcendent is very different than the word transvalue. Transcendent means to climb. In other words, one has now walked the walk, pade. Climbed the mountain, if you will, to the top, not skipped over the mountain, and not simply claim to be at the top, if you will, or claim that all is one, which is actually bad math, or other erroneous cliches, such as there's no divisions, no labels. This is being stuck actually in one brain hemisphere and not fully utilizing the left brain analytical, logical, rational thinking area. So over the last few years, we've been working on developing some podcasts for everyone to use. But please remember, when it comes to the religions of the world, they most often offer all of their teachings, rituals, etc., on a donation basis. This is profound because even though there is a business end to religion, obviously they have to survive, the teachings, the rituals, etc., are generally always offered on a donation basis. Think of the profundity of that. Number one, it's the realization that you can't buy and sell the inner essence, the spirit, if you will, or the Atmana to the Hindus. And number two, then it's open for everyone to come, rich and poor alike. However, it is really important that people respect that what they're given is something very profound, and who's ever giving that is offering their time and expertise and all the time that they put into learning. So it's very proper, it's ethical, it's honest to give and return. That's why donations are offered for religious services. Very different than creating a .com or business out of religious teachings and practices, which is deceptive at best and dishonest at worst. So when it comes to the religions of the world, don't forget to give. I mean, this is very important. Don't simply take, because then that's actually a theft. One wouldn't walk into a store and simply walk out without paying, would they? Are religious teachings any less important, less profound, that one can simply take without giving in return? And the fact that the gifts are anonymous, in a sense, for no one knows how much you're putting in the hundi, the collection plate, if you will. This puts the onus thoroughly on the devotee. So, our many podcasts that are offered to all of you, free of charge, are there to help you understand life in general, and then coming from the specific Hindu yoga, religious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical lifestyle, it's really all of those things. And there's many podcasts now, and you can go through them and find out which ones have the most meaning to you at the moment. But here's a good way to get started. We have one called the Panch Ayur Tattvas, or 5 Vital Life Principles. Now, these are 5 things that really make a lot of sense to have in one's psychological quiver, if you will, as they go through life. Wisdom, judgment, critical thinking, logic/reasoning, and generalities and specifics. So now we talked about something in general here, but specifically, Hindus would speak of wisdom as samadhi, for example, calm wisdom. Judgment, vichara. Critical thinking, vivek. Logic and reasoning would be the nyaya darshana, or philosophy. and generalities and specifics, sarvesham visesa. So on your own, you can go through this podcast where we go into detail into these 5 areas, which in Hinduism we could call the Panch Ayor Tattvas, the 5 vital life principles. Another foundational podcast would be the 4 bodies and the EDME principle. EDME. ED is, of course, an abbreviation for education, and then me. In other words, we're saying to ourselves as individuals, educate me. And is this then not what life is all about? Is we have to be self-motivated, educate ourselves? So if we look at this acronym EDME, you can see a profound life principle here of individuals at some point understanding that it is much better to seek an ethical life than an unethical life. Keeps us out of trouble, for example. Keeps us out of bondage. An unethical life ultimately will lead to bondage, imprisonment. So we strive to find an ethical life and then be fully devoted to life itself, to ourselves, to our spouse, to our children, family, friends, career, religion, if you will. And then we deepen that in concentration, which is simply and profoundly the meaning of the word meditation. And if we keep up this process, it will lead to a rather enlightened life. Now, that's not a spooky word. It simply means, and profoundly, that we have inner epiphanies, if you will, inner revelations, inner light experiences, like the light bulb going off in the head, and also feeling light, as opposed to feeling heavy down and depressed. So this EDME principle is an understanding of the life journey in general. Educate or ethics and devotion, meditation to enlightenment. Now here's where the specifics comes in, and the da part, the do you Hindu part. Because in the Hindu yoga dharma, these 4 are karma yoga, Hindu ethics, bhakti yoga, Hindu devotions, raja yoga, Hindu meditations, to enlightenment or gyan yoga. So again, here's how we understand, remember, the Panchayor Tattvas, the vital importance between generalities and specifics. In general, using English, obviously, ethics, devotion, meditation, enlightenment. Specifically in Hinduism, karma, bhakti, raja, jnana. And these are also recognizing that we essentially have 4 bodies. We have a physical body, we have a mental body, emotional body, and, whether we know it or not, a soul body. To some, Hindus would say Atma. And remember, for Hindus, Atma Darshana Paramo Dharma. The word Dharma is our word for religion, if you will. It's specifically about Hinduism or Hindu Dharma, and it means to hold. In other words, understanding what holds us together, what holds communities together, what holds life together. And it's not unlike the English word religion, which root meaning means religio relegare, to link, to bind, to tie. Simply trying to understand what ties or links people together. So religion is a general term. Dharma is a very specific term, but they do have similar meanings. So in the Hindu yoga dharma, we say Atma Darshana Paramo Dharma. Our supreme duty or principle or tradition in life is to realize our inner essence, which we call the Atmana. Hence the 4 bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and soulful, if you will. Deha, mana, bhavaha, atmana. Then another podcast you may want to initially go to is the one that we call Bahumanaha Ichati, which in English means want respect. And really, who doesn't want to be respected? And we go through 10 points, obviously in the general language of English, and then we show where this comes from in the Hindu Yoga Dharma. Basically, it's about respecting yourself, Tattvamasi. Learning to set boundaries in your life, Dharma. Standing up meaning how you present yourself to others, Shraddha. Learning to speak up, Brihaspati, Vach. Standing up and being courageous, Devamurga. But yet being polite and humble, Ekadantaya. Learning to keep your word, promises, Vrata. Learning to listen up, Gajjikanikaya. Keeping an open mind, Vilambita Sutra, but not too open. Remember, this is the balance between being closed-minded and so open-minded that our brains fall out. And then 10, one will be well-equipped to be of value to the world, Dana. So again, you can go over these podcasts and we go into much more detail, but this is just to get you started. And then another very important part is the podcast on the gas principle, GASS. Now, this was inspired by a paper written by an Indian Hindu author named O.P. Gupta, who wrote a paper entitled Hindus Suffer from Gas, and by this he meant genetically acquired slavery syndrome. Or we could add selfish syndrome, self-centered syndrome, surrender syndrome. It's a sad fact that many Hindus, even though they're very strong in other areas of life, when it comes to the Dharma, they have let so much go. And part of that is the fault of a fundamentalist universalist mindset, which one can go over in our GEM principle and in our NAT principle. So in order to overcome this negative gas of genetically acquired slavery syndrome, selfish, self-centered, surrender syndrome, here's 4 things that in life in general can really help us to go successfully through life by respecting our teachers. And remember, our first teachers are our parents. And then all teachers have a place where they teach, be it the home, the school, the church, the mosque, the synagogue, the mandir, kovil, etc. And then they all give their teachings. And then it's up to us to do our own homework. 4 vital things. Respect your teachers. Respect where they teach. Respect the teachings. And then do your own homework. Be self-motivated. Now, in Hinduism, we would call this the guru, ashram, shastras, and sadhana. So again, go over this podcast and it'll help give you a deeper understanding of these 4 principles in life in general, and then how they should be carried out in the Hindu yoga dharma. And with all of these, we always want to look at the opposite and see why we come short, for example. In other words, in this case, if we fail to respect our teachers, starting with our parents, if we don't respect where they teach, the home, the school, the churches, the mosques, the mandirs, etc., if we don't support them, if we don't do our homework, if we're not self-motivated, that's a recipe for failure. At this point, you might want to listen to our podcast on the GPS. Everybody knows what a GPS is. But we use this as an acronym for gratitude, persistence, and sacrifice. Sacrifice means sacred doing. And these 3 things are manifested by simply and profoundly saying thank you, gratitude. Persistence, I can do this. And sacrifice, who can I help? This is so profound. You know, when people are stuck or mired in unwholesome behavior, an unhealthy lifestyle, they'll often say, especially those in addiction, that they've lost their moral compass, their internal compass, their grounding. They just don't feel grounded. They feel all over the place. In other words, they've lost their GPS, their direction in life, which profoundly begins by simply saying thank you. I can do this. Who can I help? Gratitude, persistence and sacrifice. For just think for a moment, that if we never say thank you, if we can't accomplish what we set out to do, and if we don't help anyone, that's a recipe, again, for disaster in life. We've lost our internal grounding, our internal compass. So as Hindus, GPS would be, thank you, dhanyavad. Persistence, that's your warrior spirit, vira. And sacrifice is our yajnam, our sacred doing, our sacrifice, which, by the way, is actually our Hindu lifestyle of yoga, yoge, yajna, yuj. Which takes us to our gem principle. Gravity, electricity, magnetism. Wow, the dynamic forces of life in physics. If you want to uncover the gem within, respect gravity, electricity, magnetism. Look at our own human body. From the belly down, gravity. Electricity at the heart and the magnetic head. Now in Hinduism, we can put this to use by understanding the progressive use of our deities, whether symbolically or from actual inner experiences of the deities, either way. We follow this basic step-by-step process from gravity, electricity, magnetism. For example, in Saivite Hinduism, Ganapati is always gravity, and he's common to all the sampradayas of Hinduism. The electricity at the heart is the youthful, loving warrior deity Skanda Muruga, to the magnetic deity head of Shiva and Parvati, the gem principle. Ganapati Muruga Shiva Shakti Om. For Vaishnava Hindus, it would be Ganapati Krishna Vishnu Lakshmi, same thing. Or Ganapati Hanuman Sitaram. In the other sampradaya, or sect of Hinduism, if you will, where we beseech the mothers, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati. And actually there's a profoundness in this Shakti sampradaya of before creation, through evolution to where we are now, Kali, Durga, Parvati. So visit our podcast on the gem principle to get a deeper understanding of this in general and specifically from the Hindu yoga Dharma. Because we can play with that word nat a little bit, because there is a word nati, which means you are properly dressed, or there is a nat with a silent G, a ganat, if you will, which is a pest. So the choice is up to us in this area of life. Do we become a fundamentalist or a fundamentalist universalist? Or do we have a balanced life of a way in the middle? In other words, are we properly appointed through life, or are we a pest? Choice is up to us. The nat principle, very important. Again, we're seeking to work towards developing a sattvic or a balanced life, equilibrium. At this point, you may want to listen to our podcast on conducting your own orchestra. Understanding our left and our right brain hemispheres, our masculine and feminine natures that we all have internally. Always remembering that externally, we're either a man or a woman. This wisdom would go a long way in helping to clarify the non-binary nonsense that we see today. Inwardly, we do have masculine and feminine characteristics, both positive and negative. Very important to understand this so that we learn to conduct our own inner orchestra. And then we can look at some basic life wisdom of the breath, of the hands, and of the eyes. Life wisdom, Ana, Hasta, and Lochana. Then you may want to look at the pros and cons of following a religion. Who is not religious? Material versus spiritual. We also have a Hindu 12-step program. Very interesting. 12-step programs are to help us recover from various, maladies, physical, mental, emotional, social. We also speak about the 7 deadly social sins. And then, of course, the Dharma. Do you, Hindu? Where we fully understand the factual nature of yoga. You can scroll to the very bottom of our podcast, the very first one. What is yoga? Remember, folks, yoga is a Sanskrit word. And Sanskrit is, by definition, the ancient Arya or noble language of the Hindus. It literally means perfectly constructed Samskritam. It's a religious language, the language of Hinduism, along with Tamil, others, of course. So therefore, anyone who's honest, whenever they utter any of these Sanskrit words, they have to recognize this is all about the Hindu religion. If not, it is completely bogus at best. Now, what is the definition of the Sanskrit Hindu word yoga? Sanskrit, not English. Yuj Atmana Brahman cha. Now, yes, we can translate these words into English, but if one says they're into yoga, they need to fully respect that this is Sanskrit and at least understand the definition of the word. Does that make sense? Especially for someone who is a 200-hour professional, certified, authoritative yoga teacher. Yuj Atmana Brahman cha. What does this mean? Yuj, Y-O-J-E, or Y-O-J. Yuj Atmana Brahman cha. To yoke, Y-O-K-E. There's the E. Y-O-K-E, to yoke to the Atmana and Brahman. Then we have to ask ourselves, what is Atmana and what is Brahman? Already deep, deep into Hinduism, not into any other religion. This is all Hindu Dharma. The Atmana is the Hindu understanding of the inner essence. Now we get into the definition of that. Satchidananda, Jyoti Shakti Ananda Shanti. And then what is Brahman? Which has absolutely nothing to do with God. Remember, folks, especially all of you Hindus, God has no place in the Hindu Yoga Dharma. That's a Anglo-Saxon word. And the capital G-O-D was invented by the Christians to remind, quote-unquote, everyone that there's only one true male creator being, noun, God. This is not what Hindus believe. Now, yes, we do have monotheistic Hindus and fundamentalist Hindus. Yeah, it's part of life itself. But the greater body of Hinduism does not believe in a male creator being. So Brahman is a neuter term referring to the greater forces of what is our individual Atmana, these greater forces of Satchidananda, Jyoti Shakti Ananda Shanti. And yoga becomes the very lifestyle of what it means to be a Hindu. That is the soul, if you will, purpose of being a Hindu, to connect Yuj, yoke, to our Atmana and then the greater source, Brahman. And we do this as Hindus through following the Hindu yoga, religious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical lifestyle. It's all of those things. Don't divide them. Don't split it up. Don't follow the MO of the invaders and the colonizers. Divide and conquer. Don't say you're a Vedantist but not a Hindu, or a Sanatanist but not a Hindu, or a Sanatani but not a Hindu, or a Saiva but not a Hindu. No. We are a Hindu family, Saiva, Vaishnava, Shakti, the three. So we are Hindus, and we do yoga to reach Atmana, all of it. Karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, jnana yoga, hatha yoga, mantra yoga, japa yoga, nada yoga, nata yoga, kundalini yoga, and ironically, paradoxically, bizarrely, the only one of those yogas that the Hindu rishis, holy men, and women too, there's some women who wrote the Vedas, the only one they said keep secret was the very one that's out there today under the guise of the misuse of the Sanskrit Hindu word yoga, and yogam to the Tamils. Hatha yoga. It's supposed to be secret. Why? Because it deals with the physical body. And you can clearly see what's happened. Just go to YouTube, go to Facebook, and watch all these, especially women, men are into it too, showing off their bodies, very sexy, very physically oriented. That's why the Rishi said, don't display that one, because of the obvious, quote unquote. And sadly, there are many Indians, whether they call themselves Hindus or not, who knows, but they've actually capitulated. Can't beat them, join them. Well, how sad is that? Stand up for principles. That's Dharma, that's Shraddha. That's understanding the wisdom of Mahaganapati, who stood up even in the face of Mahadeva Shiva, as a symbolic reminder to all of us. Stand up for principles. What's the point of having principles in life if you're not going to stand up for them? So we are Hindus and we do yoga to reach Atmana, all of it. And we keep the Hatha Yoga one secret. Well, it's going to be a while before we can correct this one, but sadly, this is what has happened throughout the ages in Hinduism. It takes decades upon decades, sometimes hundreds of years before erroneous conceptions are cleared up. Look at the swastika. Wow. It's coming to a shock to everybody to realize that Hitler never ever even used the word swastika. And we all know that swastika is a Hindu word meaning good fortune and auspiciousness. To their credit, Kona's done a great job with that, but many Hindu organizations they're not really clear. They're trying, but they're not really clear and emphatic on telling the general public that, wait a minute, all of yoga is Hinduism. We are Hindus, and we do yoga. And if others would like to join in and study Hinduism, fine, do that, but don't pretend to be teachers out there until you become a Hindu. This would be true to any of the religions of the world. Makes logical, ethical, honest sense, sane sense, to first and foremost become a member of a particular religion before one ever attempts to teach that. And certainly that takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. And Hindus should know better than this. They should know, because in other areas of their life, and specifically regarding the Dharma, whether they're studying classical Hindu music or dance, they take decades and decades to perfect their art. And they're allowing people to become professional authorities. That's the meaning of certified. Yogis in 200 hours. Wow. People have lost the profoundness of what it is to be a true yogi or yogini. These are people who are renunciates, basically don't even see them. They care nothing for the outer world. As Svatmarama said, Yogi Svatmarama, Hatha Vidya Bhaveda Yavate Guya Niveda Tu Prakasha Varanam. This knowledge of Hatha is powerful, Bhaveda, when you keep it secret, Guya. And it loses power, Niveda, when you display it, Tu Prakasha Varanam. And they all said the same thing, whether it's the Siva Samhita, Giranda Samhita, Siddhasranta Bharati of Yogi Garakana, they all said keep this one secret. They all beseech Mahadev, Shiva. So, of course, all of real yoga is Hindu Dharma. There are only two yogas, you know, Sat and Asat, true and false. True yoga is all about the Hindu Dharma. False yoga is obviously what we have today. Hot yoga, power yoga, dog yoga, laughter yoga, new yoga, goat yoga, beer yoga, Kino yoga, Adrian's yoga ad nauseum. Why have you allowed this, Hindus? Do you Hindu? Or are you going to be continually taken advantage of? Choice is up to you.